Hello and welcome everyone. Here we are today with Astrid. Super grateful and excited to have one of the curating visionary co-founders of We're Impact Collective here and the mind between so much. I'm so grateful for having you here today, Astrid, and hearing more about everything that happens in your beautiful universe. And before we begin, we have a little introduction because Astrid is the founder of We're Impact Collective, where she mentors, trains, and cheerleads and advises wealth holders and pioneers with their impact journey. She's a seasoned board member, an IC member, guest lecturer, and an impact investor herself, with a strong focus on systemic perspectives and collaborative innovation. Astrid is a firm believer in doism, prioritizing action over endless analysis, and applies this philosophy to help individuals, family offices, and organizations to turn ambition into a step-by-step approach. She embraces steward-owned principles, ensuring that decisions serve long-term missions rather than short-term gains. And her work is about rethinking, reshaping, and building the new, always seeking collaborations that drive systemic change. Astrid has created Impact into Play, a place for high-speed inspiration to explore what is new and get to know other people acting on their dreams. And she started the Explorers Club, where we are talking here today, and she's built new kinds of systemic perspective, strategic portfolio approaches. Beyond her role at We're Impact Collective, Astrid is actively involved in the impact investment landscape, serving on various investment and impact committees, where she helps guide capital towards social and environmental transformation. In addition to her advisory work, she initiates collaborations that accelerate systems change, ensure the capital is not just invested, but strategically deployed for long-term progress. Astrid, I really love how you bring this philosophy, sustainable finance, and business strategy together. And truly is such an honor to not just have you here with us today, but be on this journey with you in the Impact Explorers Club and the Explorers podcast. So thank you so much for joining us and for your time. And yeah, to begin with, it's always wonderful to hear a little bit more about your background, your why. What was it that first called you into impact and systems change?
Well, first of all, thank you for this really beautiful introduction, Lila. Happy to be on this journey together for quite a while already, and I think we're both going into this field with this doism kind of feeling and building things and love it. Yeah, I was in a business kind of environment in fast-moving consumer goods, building brands. I decided that that was not really what I wanted in life, especially after having 3 children. It felt like what am I building for who? How is this shareholder and this profit-driven kind of world going to influence my children? So it was actually through pregnancy, I think, that was 19 years ago, no, 20 years ago. So a long time ago that I started to realize like this can't be the system. I started to work not for the biggest companies anymore, but for smaller social initiatives or ecological corporations, one of the first B Corps of Europe. And then I helped them in scaling, finding new customers and bringing the narrative not from the dark green story, but more to a story that more people would feel like, yeah, it can also be my story. But then I found out that it's not just, stories and people and ideas and innovation. It's actually a lack of capital that you see when you're in this world of social innovations or ecological innovations. And that's where I started to realize it's actually impact investing in itself that needs to scale and grow. So that's where my journey began. It's like 20 years ago with the realization, like, this can't be it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing this. And I really feel you're coming in with such a broad experience from so many different perspectives, and then becoming a mother, really understanding the importance, right? That life is so much more about living for the future generations and making sure that what we have on this beautiful planet can be preserved for those. And I wonder, was there a specific moment, experience, or a realization that shifted apart from becoming a mother, how you see the world?
I think it was when I went to a first real beautiful holiday, this kind of 5-star luxury safari when I was younger. And I had this beautiful experience, like this, the most luxurious kind of experience that you can imagine. And then we had this guide who said, like, after 10 days, you have been experiencing Africa, like, yeah, really like a tourist. You have not seen how it's behind the scenes and how difficult life can be. And are you also ready to really go to the extreme and to the other side, going in slums and, meeting and seeing all people with all the difficulties in life? So it was actually a moment that was earlier in my life that made me feel very awkward, like being on one side while there's always also the another side. And really, yeah, it was just really in my face, this very tough conditions. And also we saw in that place that people are working on our waste and were doing things, with chemicals to give us beautiful clothes. So it was, the idea of seeing, I think, really the confrontation of seeing the other side that made me feel each time a little less okay with what's happening or not seeing what was happening. And yeah, I think slowly it gave this feeling of taking a responsibility in that. So not really one moment. I did meet one person in the Netherlands who was like, at that time, I think 60 or 70 years old. And he was on the same journey, but then 30 years ahead of me. And he explained me about the first investments in bigger companies doing good, and how he enjoyed life as well on the impact investing side, working with all pioneers, having this kind of people in your life, feeling part of building something. So that was for me a key meeting from somebody. His name is Frank in our region in Belgium and the Netherlands. Everybody knows him. He's still, taking initiatives, still enjoying life. This in this field. So that was like, yeah, I think a key person to meet and also to see, like, oh, behind the door, I'm opening this door. I didn't know it existed, impact investing. I'm opening the door. Wow, there are like 50 other very cool people here and people that feel like, okay, we're actually doing something. And of course, it's also, it's not easy. And you also become friends in the journey of tryouts and things that you already see. And then maybe you're not immediately working yet. And so, yeah, I think through that meeting of that person, yeah, I do think my life changed, with people and the kind of companies I wanted to be involved with. Yes.
Wow, beautifully said. And I really, can connect a lot with this because in a way, people like yourself or other people in the impact investing space have also been like my mentors or guides on this journey that really opened up so many perspectives and just understandings that there's a huge iceberg to explore when it comes to impact investing and purpose first investing, or key terms like steward ownership. Right. And in a way, this is also the space right now here with this podcast, right? It's another attempt to open up a platform where we can have open conversations about your previous experiences, about what's emerging in the ecosystem and how people are shaping, this very new and not so new at the same time, broad area of impact finance, right? And in this huge space, I'm curious to hear, what are you currently most focused on and why does it matter to you at this moment?
Yeah, I think many people start to understand there is something to do with finance. That's already the first thing. I think 20 years ago, it was even not the case. I think now it's like more and more people understand and see it. So that's a good thing and it's still needed. So it's still in my space to, to go to more traditional kind of places or have meetings with people just to share about, there's also something good to do with your capital, with your money. And then the last years I've worked mainly on impact investing, and then it was really on what is the team that you are focused on, what are like the different solutions in that team, and then there were like different asset classes and different instruments that you could try to bring together in a certain team. Like food, you can also do philanthropic budgets, but also have you have all the variety of asset classes in a team. But I'm most of the time working last 2 years much more on bringing those things together. So get away from only one or two teams or only one or to asset classes, but actually trying to understand that if you see a certain problem or problems, because we have many different problems, to see that you can't just solve that with one kind of team or one kind of asset class, and that you actually need to have broader perspectives, more perspectives, and more kind of asset classes or financial instruments, and also go not only from what's really obvious and in your face, like waste. Of course you need to work on it, but it's going deeper into why is it that we see it as such a normal thing? Did we arrive at this place? What's the consumer mindset? What is capitalism? What are the incentives? Where do we teach that? Where do we learn that? All of that. So it's looking into different teams, trying to combine that and going deeper. And when you think of those kind of solutions, you end up in different kind of things, because you think also about governance or how power is distributed. And of course, many of the issues are still the same. There are many issues in nature or in social topics, but it's more like trying to see how all the dimensions of those issues come together, try to understand what are root causes. And for that, it's a new approach that is that's getting much more in the field of impact investing, which is the systemic approach where you think first of all on your own mindset. How do I behave as an investor? What do I know? Why do I think that? Is it normal? All those kind of shifts in your own thinking, to understand them, to feel them, to maybe unlearn them. It's a different kind of allocation, and it's also now it's this nice group and some projects. But if you want to think of it as a much more ambitious kind of approach with more people and more capital and more different kind of solutions integrated, also need to think on how could it scale and how can we create a kind of infrastructure that issues and capital, it's much more easily connected, and there's much more coordination between all people wanting to create some kind of solution. And I think you know that it's like this three-dimensional kind of approach and different topics, and going from the urgencies of our time, the horizon one, but also going deeper down in the layers of the root causes, and then bringing wealth holders together, see what kind of things are emerging, then checking in. What is the result? Okay, this is where we ended. Why? What were our thoughts? How did we make the decisions? And then try to create a learning loop, because that's the most fun thing about this times of our lives, is that there are many issues, many urgencies, many things that are uncertain, and nobody has the answer. So it feels like really nice to do that with groups together, and to try slowly, not slowly and not allocating, but trying slowly and thoughtfully. How could we do that? So that's, I think, most in my agenda, like what kind of initiatives fit in that, what kind of wealth holders are ready. If we want to scale it, how would that look like? Not just our thing, but on a much more bigger kind of movement of thinking in different dimensions, I think.
Great, Astrid. Thank you so much. And what I find very interesting about what you're saying here is really taking all of these different dimensions and layers of very complex issues that we're facing these days, really, and focusing on the root causes, understanding what are the deeper issues that we're facing. And I hear also terms like collaborative finance, right? Or understanding the systemic root issues that we're facing in so many different areas. It's not easy, right? Especially when we're trying large scale, when we're thinking, how can we, bring this capital into some of the most pressing challenges right now that we're facing. I mean, just a couple of things: the huge, like disappearance of biodiversity, the acidification of our oceans, of our rivers, the lack of drinking water around the world. Now, a lot of issues around the world with democracy building also, but all of the energy space, right? There is so much to do, and all at once. that sometimes it might seem overwhelming. And then also there are many challenges with the infrastructure on how do we bring those stakeholders together. Indeed, it's been quite a journey learning and understanding that the more you go in, it's just tipping the iceberg and there is just so much more to unfold. And even at the Explorers Club, we speak about this iceberg. And I'm curious to hear what have been some of the greatest challenges and tensions that you've encountered on this way, on this learning and exploring journey? And what has helped you personally to stay committed?
That's a tough question, I think. Yeah, I think first it was, we were talking about people being homeless. It was like an easy example that it's not just about creating new or more beds or more housing opportunities, but it is also why are they homeless? And it might be that they had a very tough relationship or some kind of trauma or something happening in their life, an illness or disease. And so I think that's like the most difficult challenge because you see all the time the needs becoming bigger in some of those topics, and the demand to ask for more money for beds is very high. And that's, I think, the biggest challenge because you need it on one side because it's solving the urgency, but it's actually like solving the symptom of it. And I think the challenge is really to go back and try to be the group of investors that understands that it's needed, but that we also should try to avoid it from happening. And then, of course, the challenge is that the perfect combination or the perfect order of the different projects or the allocation is not known, and that you have to be able to deal with one side complexity and on the other side unknowing, and on the other side also keep moving. The challenge is that every day more bets are needed in all the different topics. Nature is destroyed, you need to restore all of it. And I think the challenge is really to stay on the specific place with understanding we are investors that have been in the field for quite a long time. Just not just investors, by the way, also people with philanthropic intentions. Yeah, we have been in this space for a long time, and let's make sure that there are enough people wanting to go for the bets, but we want to go for this variety of root cause kind of solutions, and then we try different things. And so I think the challenge is embracing that feeling of this is the best we think for now, but it might maybe change in 1 month or in 3 months. And we also make it open source, so many people have different suggestions. So the challenge is also we are used to have an issue, find a solution, and then go for that, and keep that as a fixed kind of solution. While here we are a moving solution, and it might change a lot. So that's a challenge because our tendency as human beings is to say, okay, that's really complex. That was really difficult. Now I studied this, or now I've been reading, or I'm listening to this expert. We should have like a simple solution, right? So I think that's the challenge for us as human beings, just to feel okay with not going for the easy, straightforward solution. And then, of course, we invest in many things that are new, that are unproven, that are seen as high risk. So it's also not so easy to stay in that field. And yeah, it's also for 10 years or longer that you're involved in different organizations. Yeah, so I think that is a challenge, that you don't know exactly where you go or exactly how to solve the problem, and just you try at your best every day. And this is changing all the time. That's, I think, the biggest challenge. And of course, people in our group are all curious and, bold kind of people, but it is difficult to keep up with all the insights. There's also AI, of course, now in our field, and it's moving much faster than, I think the impact investing world was going. There was like maybe every year or two a new method or a new framework. And if you knew that, you were, you knew what was happening in the field. And now it's, there's much more dynamics in the field and much more insights. much more to learn actually. And so keep on doing while there's new things coming. Yeah, I think that's it's a nice challenge for us.
Wow. Amazing. Thank you so much for explaining it so detailed. And I really think that, something that I totally resonate here is like coming in with this open and just like very curious mind to say, okay, there is a lot we can unlearn. And then there is a lot of new things that we can learn. But to be honest, like it's such a new path on systemic investing, on really being aware that there are, well, topics and solutions around the world that maybe are not like the most highly in return on investment, but if it works, it can be such a great breakthrough that it needs those few very courageous minds and very courageous impact investors to come together and really believe in that, because those are the ones who can really shape that path and build a legacy, build an example that can then inspire other impact investors. So I think that's been incredibly just interesting to see how that all comes together. And I'm curious to hear, because in this podcast, we're asking this question also to see what is like your personal journey right now. Is there a specific systemic root cause that you're specifically passionate about or that you're hoping to influence? So I'm curious to hear from you. Yeah, is there a specific area that calls you more than others? And what would be your ideal systems change in that ecosystem?
That's a very difficult question because, I care a lot about many different topics and solutions. But I think the thing what's most on my mind is our own wealth industry, like we organize for preservation and for growth, and the incentive and the KPI or the targets for our own industry. Yeah, the questioning of that, I think that's most on my mind. And that asks, of course, for difficult questions like what's enough and how can we organize different ways of power and make it a more distributive environment and economy. So I think that's on an intellectual side, something that triggers me really a lot. And it has different solutions from steward ownership or commons or community owned, but also changing the way our tax system works, but also mindset of the investment industry. So that's definitely a topic because I like it because it has so different dimensions of unlearning what we have, and it has also already good examples of things we can invest in that show the parts, like these are things that you can do if you change your organization without the power as it exists today or shareholders as it exists today. And of course, I mean, everything that has to do with nature and democracy is also very close to my heart. And yeah, I think within the nature side, it's of course, people would think of giving rights to rivers, but also all the regional thinking that's happening now today, and also the approach of having a food system, understanding how the mapping is, what are the different parts, what are the triggers, where can you go as a group if you look at a certain problem, and how nature is respected in that kind of propositions, has a right at the table to speak, but also, to create long-term conditions so nature can flourish and heal, and we can also heal in our relationship with nature and understanding more our place in this, like not on top, but being part. So that's definitely something. And then maybe the last one on this democracy, I think that became more and more urgent. Although I've been donating for quite a while on innovations in democracy, because you see that there is a big difference between our leaders of today and how we feel when we vote, and that there is a clearer pathway to not just keep the things as they are today, but really innovate the way we decide on the bigger things that happen. And that feels, of course, more urgent than ever. And there are, I think, many people in the systemic field bringing those kind of solutions together. It's also a matter of trying new things with many things at risk also. So I think it has to do with how we organized our society, our economy, our decisions. I think that's what triggers me most. And of course, I'm also very into things like female energy, for example, or new kind of solutions from fungi, or there are many things that I think are much needed in this systemic view. But of course, everything that has to do with power and distribution of it and wealth distribution is something that I think is in any systemic portfolio important, because it is going into this root dynamics of things, and that's where actually the innovation is it's most needed and most additional also.
Thank you so much. And this really leads me to this concept of rethinking power and how resources are distributed. And as you said, right now it's very, very tricky. We see a lot of unbalanced situations around the world, and ultimately our nature, one of the most precious resources, our biodiversity and the living systems that surround us, are suffering from that, right? And then in general, also keyword democracy building and everything you've said about the importance of having governance and systems and the infrastructure to have even democratic voting opportunities, right? It ultimately comes down to points like policy building, culture, having healthy relationships and communications, and then how is that influencing the markets and creating long lasting change? I'm really curious to hear, how does one engage with so many different leverage points in the ecosystem? And what have been some of your practical experience with those so far? Like, is there any specific use case or success story or something that you would like to share with us to make it a little bit more tangible for someone who might not yet has heard about systems change or what we can imagine under that?
Yeah, I think first of all, it's impossible to know it all, you know, by one person. That's that's a realization that I think people in the impact industry and also in the systemic field, they understand. Like there's so many topics, so many layers. So that's, I think, the first real practical thing. Like, don't think that you can be an expert in all the different dimensions. So surround yourself with many people that have different industries backgrounds or different policy network, or that kind of things. I think we have this Explorers website coming up. You can see all the different projects that we curated, and also why and how we try to combine different what we call lenses, so that it's not just only ecological or social or economic or the narrative lens, but that we actually try to combine them and make them, a possible first kind of portfolio kind of thing. I think that's the most concrete to see, and all of them are, of course, individual, tangible projects. I would say.
Interesting. And is there a specific project that gives you a sense of real hope, energy, or makes you feel super, super excited about it? And maybe think about a project that is completely out of the box, but you just believe in the vision and you feel that it's necessary in this world. And is there a specific project or investment that comes to mind?
Yeah.
Consider philanthropy, but also impact investing, something that you're really passionate about.
And one thing that I really I'm intrigued by it. It's a Spanish fund, a Spanish organization, and what they do is they buy companies, and then they say, how can we change the power structure, and how can we make the profit of this organization for everybody of us? So they start. Instead of executing orders, everybody is getting part of the decisions. Of course, there's a whole methodology around it. And what we see is then that those organizations that have less layers and also do not have the incentive of just economic growth, how they change the way they work. So for me, that's really like a blueprint kind of thing that I'm very curious on how this will evolve, because it's now small investments and much more on the hypothetical thinking, like that we can change a business also from the inside if we change the incentives or how the layers of management and decisions are organized in a different way. And what you then see is a kind of idea that people in the end, they want to do good if they feel they are part of it and they can decide. And it's not just for others that they work really hard, but it's for their community, or it's for themselves as well, that they make different kinds of decisions. So they will include more human good and respect for nature, and will also become more innovative. So these are the things that I'm excited about, because it's something that also on an investment logic makes sense, because many companies will be sold in the next coming 10 or 20 years, with many people think not somebody to take over. And so my hope is really that, all those organizations, when they can become from themselves, if they're owning themselves, and they have different kinds of incentives, that the economy itself will go into a different kind of direction. So these are the things that for me, they inspire a lot, because it's also something that they try on a larger scale. Of course, there have been companies that tried this kind of things, but this is really with the investors' logic, changing also the place of the investors in this place, and also building this small scale new kind of economy with a very human vision, that people in the end, with different kind of incentives, will also act differently, which is I think my hope, that if you change the context, behavior will change. And on the other hand, maybe another example is really on the narratives, because we all have mental models. We're all trained to believe what we are learned or what we have seen. So also on new kind of stories in documentaries about new different ways of looking or relating to nature. For example, it is also something that I believe is really important, because it gives each time a different perspective, and in the end, a different belief. And we need more of that, because we are constantly reminded of the kind of incentives or world or behavior that we are, that the society has been organizing around. So, if you really want to change the behavior, I think the context is really important. And so the narrative work, bringing people together for this new kind of visions, inspiration, documentaries, it feels like more intangible, but more needed than ever. And especially, I think, with all the social media trying to poison some of our ways of thinking, it's also really needed that we go into media and the way we see and feel, and the influencers of today, that there are other influencers than the ones of today. So it's also time, I think, for the system investors and the impact investors to show up and bring their voice out and create new stories, and I don't know, maybe copy some of those really, I don't know, different kind of influencers, but then for good, and set up things around that. That's also on my mind, I think, for the next months, to really think of how can we coordinate and structure and do something more coordinated on that kind of mental beliefs that we see around us.
Beautiful. Thank you. I mean, so many things that come up here. First, this is exactly what we're doing right now, right here. And this is also an invitation, right? To like, just, what we're having, this open conversation, is literally what we would love to see more around us, is just having these open and honest chats about what's been moving us and what we feel inspired by, and also inviting others to share more about this, because ultimately we are all very often working in our siloed ecosystems, not really aware of one another. And when we create these open ways of communication and media, I really feel inspired by this initiative, because we can create a narrative that does not only open up the space to talk about it so openly and so vulnerably and authentically, but on the other side, also ideally inspires people that may have not heard about this and would like to learn a little bit more here. So as we're talking about this already, I would love to hear your thoughts and your ideal visions for this Explorers podcast, because it was indeed birthed with you and by you, and together we're kind of doing this now. So I'm also really excited to hear your long-term vision and your ideal aspirations, not just for this podcast, but for We Are Impact Collective and the Explorers itself also.
Yeah. Well, I think the ideal dream, of course, is that, that we change the way we invest or allocate. But that's, that's very, very big. That's a very big ambition. And I think for our own group, I do think that if we inspire more people in our field to go together on this journey, to do this in a collaborative way, and to also be okay with more risk and unknowing, then I think that we are doing good. I also don't want to overset our own KPIs, but I do think that it is very small today, and that we should be able to influence many investors around the world and also reach many people. And it's just starting now, with some explorers, some stories, and some projects. But my intention is definitely that there will be a lot, and that it's much more coordinated, and there's an easy way, if you have a good systemic initiative, to find the wealth holders in a more efficient way, because we lose like 2 or 3 years almost to get this gap between, even if they both exist, to get them, to find them. And then, of course, from the moment there's more capital allocation to this kind of initiatives, the more they will exist, and more people will start to work around them. So it becomes, like we have created impact investing. I think this is something that's also a field in a couple of years, that it just around, and like people understand it and feel engaged and feel inspired, and also would like to share their story and also their authentic reflections, because it's something that we don't see enough. We have created this beautiful conferences and these beautiful scenes and places, but actually this part of not knowing and doing it together and feeling comfortable with that and excited and having friends with that in this field, I think it can appeal many people. And there's like this big awakening nowadays, I think, with all the issues surround us, and people asking themselves, what can I do? And most of the people have talent. They can look to put their capital into doing good. And also the people who are having a capital, they're also wondering, like, is there something I could have done differently? Or what can I do to not create this kind of things that we see around us? So creating these places through all the members of our collective and all the explorers and all different organizations we engage with, I think we can actually also give hope for many people to understand that they are the system and they are part of it. And it's through their decisions that we shape the conditions for what's coming next. And we all always feel overwhelmed and small in the big world, but it's actually through connecting that we can be, have a difference or a leverage point. And I think we all understand it, that, if you're working on silos or just with your small budgets or only with your talent, maybe you're not moving as fast a needle as needed. And so I think it's not just capital allocation, but it's giving some pragmatic, actionable kind of thing to go from, seeing the world as it is to trying to be part of the new one, and being okay that it's definitely not going to be the same that what we have already built before, because that gave exactly this kind of problems that we face now. And I think it's hopeful for many people to know and feel like, oh, there are people that actually, are trying to think of something with another outcome. So I think in maybe 5 years or so, or 10, it's something very common. People don't ask, like, do you do systemic investing? But they ask, why don't you do systemic? That we change the conversation and also ask the question, like, so my capital and my talent is for I don't know, it's for 100% in systemic. What about yours? And because what we have seen in the impact field is that many people convinced of impact investing still only allocate like 5% of their wealth. And so we need to go much deeper in mindset change, and then also have social dimensions of a group that holds you, that holds you this vision of, 5% is not enough. I mean, how do you think if society improves with 5%, that's not enough. So that's also, I think, important that we change this conversation to higher ambitious approaches, and that people really, that their capital allocation or their talent allocation is really how they want to see the future.
Beautifully said, Astrid. And I think this leads us to this term multi-capital approaches too, right? That we love talking about so much, and starting to just kind of like unweave and demystify what that might actually mean. Hearing your story, I mean, your impact goes far beyond financial capital. You really bring a social dynamic, a cultural and intellectual human capital through not just your networks, but also your ideas, the spaces you've created for this reflection and open dialogue. And when we talk about multi-capital forms and how this might reflect and influence the multiple dimensions that we live in, I'm super curious, how do you see the measuring part of this? How do you see actually taking not just the direct outputs into account, but really starting to understand and try to measure the systemic progress? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how do we actually start understanding this, and where do we see it ultimately? Is it in stronger networks? Is it in actual cultural shifts, behavioral change? I'm curious to hear your thoughts on the impact measurement side of things.
Yeah, I think in the end, it will be about the well-being of all of us, how we feel, and, not just we as humans, but, whether there is well-being for nature and animals and everybody involved. So I think that's the ultimate outcome. And then, of course, the question is, what do you then measure? And I think with one of our explorers, we try to figure this out. And what we definitely know, that if you try to reduce it to one KPI, for example, or two, that's never representing the action, because there are always many different KPIs that influence each other and that are in the same field. So I think the end where we are today is that we have defined 800 KPIs, and that, of course, that through AI we understand how a certain project is connected to another project through its people, through its solution, through its network. There are KPIs on the different dynamics and layers of this solutions and this network, and that we try to have this overview. But it's much more like, if you change something here, something there changes, something there, something there, something there, and then it's with 800 KPIs at the same time. But that's really, I think, for the persons who are really going very deep dive in this topic. I think for now, that can feel much more closer to what everybody knows is like, is this company that I'm investing in, or this fund, or this stock thing that I'm investing in, is it representing what I think is needed as a systemic change solution? And I think many of us know that just out of intuition and wisdom. And, you can also feel solutions without knowing which are the 800 KPIs. I mean, we know all, if you talk with people, they will always talk about solutions that they have seen that are good for nature and good for communities and good for society and fair. So they always already start with these examples of many different elements of doing good in a combination. And of course, you can try to figure out which are the best 800. And we do, we like that. So I think that's a bit, the outcome is the well-being. And there are many ways of approaching how you measure then this well-being. And then I'm also very careful of not, thinking of new metrics or methodologies that would give this excuse to the investment field, like, we are still working or figuring out the best KPIs. So we slow down a bit or we wait. So I think it's two ways. I like to do that, going into all those KPIs. And on the other hand, we just also not make it more complex than it is. I think when we know a lot in our bodies, and we just in everybody's feeling of what feels matching with the outcome of a system that we want.
Yeah, no, absolutely. This is really, really well explained. And we're coming to like a conclusion from this wonderful conversation, but I do want to just bring some awareness to this incredible opportunity that we have with collaborative capital and really building the trust layers between another to, join forces, join resources to really be brave and sometimes invest into projects and businesses that, as I said earlier, might not be the first return on investment as we are used to it from the classical finance, but the long-term impact that can ultimately leverage from that is really, really strong. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts around the future of coordination and infrastructure in order to have a trustful collaborative capital. And how do you see different stakeholders joining forces? And what would be your ideal vision for that?
Well, the ultimate ideal vision is, of course, that we together decide, like, this is like for now the top priority, and that all investors and capital holders and people with talent very much coordinate on how they will approach that specific topic. And I do think it is possible with the intelligence that we have and the infrastructure that is surrounding us, by bringing people together with around the same topics and the same kind of conversations, and helping organize in a more efficient way. So I think the vision is to create those kind of infrastructures, not of ourselves, of course, but be very close to people developing this kind of infrastructure so that more people can be part of it. It's like, there is a lot of infrastructure. All the social media is infrastructure. All the media consumption that we have is infrastructure. So there are many examples. The question is, how do you bring certain people around certain topics with talent and capital in the most coordinated way, in the most scaled way as well? So that's our tryouts that we want to do. We are doing them on small scale, but they can be on a bigger scale, because then it's not just some people working on this and some people on that, but you actually leverage each other. And of course, first you need to trust this infrastructure, and you need to build this infrastructure. It does not exist in itself. There are many things that exist, but they are not connected. So you need to find easy solutions on bringing the nodes, how we call them, bringing them together and have an exchange on that level. And in a small scale level, it's networks, it's groups, it's people bringing things together, and of course they influence their different peers and groups. But I think the vision is to replicate that on a much bigger scale. And I think around the world, there are so many people who want to put their talent and their capital into it. They just lack the infrastructure of understanding, this is actually my talent, or this is actually where my capital could be most efficient. And this is how you can do that. And there are like thousands of people at the same day wanting to do the same thing. And there is like something taking the coordination of those capital and talent groups together to get a much more effective way of trying to find solutions, because there's also a lot of things that get lost, many ventures that don't make it, or many investors that try things for the first time and they might not work and then they give up. And so also on the finding the most effective ways, to spend your talent and your capital. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And we do have the technologies ready to coordinate, but also to pool capital and talent together. And of course, it's now a lot in the making and it's a lot of development, and we follow it closely. And I do think it is needed. We need infrastructure, we need narratives coordinated. That's part of the systemic field to build.
Great. And I really love what you're saying about, just bringing those, hearts and minds and talents together for those causes. And I have a feeling that there are people listening to this right now that might wonder, how can they support your work? How can they support your vision, your philosophy, but also the concrete actions that you're doing? So I'm wondering, how can people, really be an added supporter, advisor, steward of the projects you're working on, and what would be useful?
You have good questions.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, I think first of all, it's of course getting to know the different projects and making sure that there is enough capital in all the possible possibilities, projects of possibilities, we call it. And there are many, if people are working on systemic solutions, they can always reach out, because we want to build this portfolio, of course, on a much bigger scale. When you're like a wealth holder, you can always reach out to our explorers group, not just me, but also team members, but also all the explorers themselves. Yeah, what is needed for this field is, of course, building some awareness, and also if people have a certain talent, I think there are a lot of options, not just within our collective, but also in all the projects and also the systemic causes or the root causes that we are working on. We have these field books. There's a lot of inspiration for people like, I could work in this space or in this space, or this is where I feel part of it. So, and of course, today it's still something relational, like you have to reach out or find a way to connect. But one day it will not just be sending an email or following or reaching out. There will be a platform where you just can figure out, this is my talent, this is the capital thing or topic or topics I want to be involved with. Then I think it will not be needed anymore that that you reach out to me or to the projects or to our organization. It will go on a much bigger scale through the infrastructure that's out there, and that what people are building today, that we will of course build within our groups. So yeah, I think for now still like old fashioned, writing emails, looking at websites, read, find out. And I think in the near future it will go much more easily to find, like, where is my part in this, and that there's answers that are given to you if you're coming to, for example, to our website or other places where explorers are active.
I love the way you framed that. And just bringing this incredible time with you here to a closure. I actually would love to invite you on a little experiment here, where I would love to invite you to actually close your eyes for just a quick second, take a deep breath with me, and I invite you to jump into the future, 10 years from now, where we actually made it. We came together in this deciding decade where we joined our forces, we joined our hearts, and we joined our wisdom and talent. And we somehow really got the infrastructure and everything, all the resources together to build a world that has been regenerated, that has cleansed its waters, its rivers, its oceans, and we can live in peace. And the local communities where we live are really, living in balance and harmony with nature. And I really see that vision. And I think truly that what we can envision is something that we can achieve. And therefore, for me, this clarity of vision has been so important, because it is also this North Star, this like hopeful point of the future, that if we cannot see it, we can actually not create it. And so I invite you on this time traveling experience with me, and would love to hear your dream vision of 10 years from now. And how do you see your ideal world? And how do you see the beautiful and complex fabric of society living in peace and harmony? And maybe you can take us on this little visualization of your ideal vision in the future.
Okay, so I think then the context will be different. And so there will be different kind of leaders. There will be different kind of economies. We as humans, we would not feel scared or burnout, but we will feel part of communities and belonging and feeling like we've done it. I think it's like almost like after the World War II kind of vision that people, all the entire world becomes part of building and rebuilding what was lost. And I do feel that in 10 years, we will look back at this 10 years like we were rebuilding, and it's actually, I think, what we are. We are rebuilding democracies and economies and solutions. And, yeah, we will all feel, like, yeah, we feel in balance, I think, with our surroundings, and feel closer to nature and each other. And of course, we should not worry, about all the urgencies that are all the time making becoming bigger and bigger, but that you actually start to see like this is what humanity can do, when they coordinate and work together. So it will be a different kind of power, different kind of governance system, a different kind of feeling for all of us in nature that can flourish. We live in our own boundaries, but with much more peace in our heart, I think, and in our lives than what we see today. Going from this high alert kind of feeling into how we actually want to feel. And that's in harmony and that's well being for all the different parts. So, yeah, I think next 10 years, it's about rebuilding and, yeah, looking back now already. Yeah, sounds like also holiday time in 10 years.
Thank you so much for taking us on this beautiful journey. And thank you so much for your time, your wisdom, for all of the work and the dedication that you do in the space. Because truly, Astrid, for me, you are one of the most inspiring, very, very heart led and very purpose led women, really, that are paving this path. So from all my heart to yours, thank you so much for the work that you do. It's been such a joy to learn and explore this world with you. And I'm very, very excited to keep this conversation going, to invite all of the listeners also to check out our platform on We're Impact Collective, because we're not just sharing this podcast, but also all of the different modules there. And yeah, let's keep it going. And definitely thank you so, 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 so much for everything. It was really amazing to have this conversation with you.
Thank you. I really liked it. It's a nice conversation. I'm looking forward to hear and listen to all the the others that will share their story. So great questions. Thank you very much for the conversation, Lila.